Hey everyone, welcome to our webinar this afternoon. Let's Get Digital, Exploring Websites Must-Have, presented by Member 365 in partnership with Trailblaze Creative. If you haven't met me before, I'm Steve Foley. I'm one of the co-founders of Member 365. Now, Christine's told me before I introduce our partners and guests, I have to go over a few housekeeping items. First thing, we're going to record the webinar and email it to you afterwards. We're also going to put it onto our website, so you can find it there. If you haven't been there, there's a wide variety of webinars you can watch. We've muted everyone, so no need to worry about your microphone. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat and we'll take a look at those. So with great pleasure, I'd like to introduce our partners from Trailblaze. Today, Candace McDermott and Tim Hines are with us. Candace is going to lead us through the presentation, and Tim's going to join us at the end for the Q&A. Trailblaze and Member 365 have been working together with a number of mutual clients to improve websites and adopt Member 365. And our team's been learning so much about website best practices through this partnership that we thought it would be great to share it with all of you. So without further ado, Candace.
Thanks, Stephen. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Candace McDermott. I'm the Director of Web and Digital Marketing at Trailblaze Creative. And today we're going to walk through some of the best must-haves for your website. And hopefully you can kind of take away some of our key information here and you can apply them to your own website. So let's get started. So the first thing that I want to talk through are some of the challenges that we've found a lot of associations are faced with. The top three that we've really noticed and that really do apply to how we go about designing websites are these. Information overload. You're typically trying to share a lot of information with your members and non-members, and you're faced with the challenge of making sure that that information is organized in a way that really helps your clients and those folks coming to your website be able to disseminate that information quickly, that they can find their pathway. You're likely also faced with the challenge of retaining current members and also attracting new members. And we know that this is kind of a very crucial challenge here, non-dues revenue streams. So aside from just attaining revenue through your membership, you're likely looking to find other ways that you can bring revenue streams into your association. So let's get started here. We're going to give kind of three kind of questions that you should ask yourself, and then three ways that you can kind of approach those questions. And by doing that, you're actually tackling those challenges that we've outlined at the beginning here. So the first question that's really important to ask yourselves as an association is, who are you? When someone lands on your website, it's really crucial that they can understand who you are very quickly, that you're clearly communicating your mission, and that folks are able to figure out what it is that you're bringing to the table so that they're enticed to become a member. There are three ways that you can kind of tackle this question of who am I, who are we as an organization. And that's first, making sure that you're consistent with your brand and design. This should be consistent throughout your website. You want to make sure that folks can clearly identify your brand just by looking at a logo, by looking at colors, and that's very clear as soon as someone lands on your website. The second thing that you should do to tackle the who are we is make sure that you're clearly communicating your mission. And the third thing that you can do is make sure that you're building an audience connection throughout your website. So I'm going to share today just a sample of an association that we think really does a great job of clearly communicating who they are. And that's the American Marketing Association. If you're in marketing, you likely already are familiar with them, but for folks who are not, they are an association that has a very big brand. And they're pretty well known, at least in our niche area. What I like about their website is as soon as you land on their homepage, it's very clear who they are. It's very clean. They're consistent with their branding. For example, you'll notice that major calls to action like join AMA and join now are outlined with a red button. They have a clear design throughout their site. They also use the same font treatment throughout their website, just little things that they do to make sure that their brand is consistent. And you'll notice that throughout all their web pages, they keep that consistency. That's really important for a lot of reasons. You want folks to be able to identify your brand, as I mentioned, as soon as they land on a website. So if someone sees later on after they visited your website, for example, a piece of material, maybe it's a grassroots marketing piece or a flyer, someone can actually identify, oh, I've seen that website. I've seen that branding and that color scheme, that logo. This flyer looks just like it. The brand is consistent. So it kind of gives a way for you to connect with your audience and for them to be able to have brand recognition later on. The second thing that I want to point out about this homepage is that they clearly are communicating their mission as soon as you land on this page. Before even reading what their mission is about, I can see that this association is definitely invested in their members, that they're trying to encourage you to join their association right away. So I know that, okay, they must have members. They must have a membership opportunity. I can tell by the way that they've organized the navigation at the top here, the items that are most important to their mission. For example, they have membership, which is clearly highlighted at the top, but they also have menu items for training, publications, right next to membership. So I can kind of infer just by looking at this navigation that training and education must be really important to them and probably is something that they highlight in their mission. I can also tell that by having publications that sharing information is also probably a part of their mission. And in fact, I did look up their mission after I kind of did my own digging through. And their mission at the association is that they strive to be the most relevant force and voice shaping marketing around the world, an essential community for marketers. So it's interesting that and important that when you land on their site, they've already kind of created that sense of community and inclusion just by looking at that navigation. The other thing that they do really well throughout their site, and is kind of one of the things that I pointed out that's really important when you're trying to express who you are, is they build a connection with their audience. They have a lot of touch points for each audience type. For example, you can see that they have training in the navigation. So they have that opportunity to learn more right when you land on the homepage. It's in the navigation. They also have a pathway for you to join as a member and to log in. And that's really important. You want to make sure that you're clearly communicating your information and pathways as soon as you land on a website. The next thing that's really important to establishing a website that's going to work well for your association is asking the question, are there clear paths? Are there clear pathways for your audience members? You want to make sure that it's easy and intuitive for folks to be able to find what they're looking for when they're on your website. Obviously, you want folks to do something when they get on your website. It's likely not just informative. You want there to be an action. If you're determined with increasing donations, memberships, or adding more subscribers to your newsletter, those pathways should be really clear and prominent throughout your website. There are ways that you can make sure there are clear pathways. The first is developing a logical structure. The second is utilizing your calls to action, and we'll get to that. And the third is establishing a conversion opportunities throughout your website. You want them to definitely do something as soon as they get to your site. You don't want them to just hop around and disappear. So I chose to showcase another an association that I think does a pretty good job at establishing those pathways. They're the National Science Teaching Association. So what I want to point out that's really interesting about how they've organized their structure, and that I noticed right away, is they actually create two very distinct pathways, one for their members and one for their non-members. So when you click on the menu item here at the top, the first thing that pops down is this right here, which is great. You're actually getting two very distinct pathways. one for their community or their members, and one that's more general for non-members. That's really important because you're kind of creating value by showcasing the two different pathways. As soon as I land on this site and I click in the menu, I can see, okay, if I am a member, this is likely where I'm going to want to go. If I'm not a member, there's a place for me to go. Likely, I'm going to find resources right here. There's a bookstore, so there's an e-com component to their site. And they separate the two pathways in a way that I think is really effective and important, because you want to make sure that you are bringing that value not just to members but to non-members, and that you make that pathway for non-members really easy to find. The next thing that we're going to kind of talk through here that I think they do really well is they do establish calls to action throughout their site. Now, if you don't know what a call to action is, it's something that you do, it's language that you use to entice an act on your website. So you want to make sure that folks are not just hopping around web pages. You want them to likely do something, right? So whether that's joining to become a member, or it's subscribing to a newsletter, maybe you want them to download a resource. And when they click that download button, there's data capture. So you could have a form that they fill out, and then when it's done, they have access to that PDF file or that document. There are all kinds of things that you might be wanting to do on your website, and it's important that you have those calls to action very clear. You'll see when you land on this website, for example, that their join button is highlighted in that blue color. It's a button that's very bold. So calls to action that are most important to your association, such as joining or becoming a member, should be prominent and likely featured at the top nav of your website. So that's something that you can kind of see here that I think they've done really well. They also have a donate button at the top, so we can infer that that's another really important message, call to action that they have on their website. And the other thing that I want to kind of draw attention to with this site that I think is really nice, they actually do establish conversion opportunities throughout the site. It's not enough that you offer a lot of stuff to your members and non-members. You need to make sure that you have some conversions happening. It doesn't just mean a sale necessarily, or someone signing up to become a member. It could be that donation button. It could also be, signing up for an event. Right now with COVID-19, a lot of events are now virtual. So you might have an upcoming webinar or a digital event, and it could be a priority that you want to showcase that event that might be coming up in the next couple months or weeks. If that's the case, you should consider adding calls to action to have that conversion above the fold on the homepage. That's kind of a best practice, especially now with the UX. You should consider doing that. And that would entice folks to register. And it's also showing them that that's something that's a priority for your association right now. It might also be that you might have a shop functionality or e-commerce piece to your website. If that's the case, you could include a call to action at the top for your shop. If that's another non-dues revenue stream that's important, I would suggest putting that at the top here. For this particular website, they do have a bookstore listed in the drop-down menu. So that is something that they offer. You might choose to kind of harbor a non-dues revenue stream like that a little bit lower in your navigation, and that's okay. It's also a really good idea to include social media links on all of your web pages, at least in the footer. Some folks do put them at the top. And that's a whole other conversation, because that's another way that you can have a touch point with your visitors. You can kind of offer that as another non-member benefit, just being a part of your social community. I'm not going to get into that today because today is really more about website, but that's a whole other conversation, and something that you should definitely look into for your association. So the third question that you should definitely ask yourself is as an association with regards to your website is, what's your function? I'm not going to go into the construction junction song. It's not what we're talking about here, not quite. What we're talking about is you want to make sure that your website is really working for you and your association. It's not enough just to have an organized website that's really beautiful and clearly communicating your message. You also want to make sure that it's functioning correctly. There's nothing worse than seeing a site that's really lovely, but then there's maybe like a broken form, or maybe the donation button doesn't work and you're not able to process a donation. That's really unfortunate. And you want to make sure that you kind of tackle those issues for your website right away, because if your website's not working for you, if it's not having those conversions or allowing people to engage with your association in the best way, then it's really not bringing the value that you want to be bringing to your members and non-members, and certainly not bringing the value that you want to bring to your own organization internally. So there are three things that you can kind of check for, or make sure that you're tackling to ensure that your website is functioning for you. The first is making sure that your website is fast and optimized. This is a big one, especially right now, especially with how quick all websites kind of are and all the different tools out there to ensure that your website is fast. The second is ensuring that it's mobile optimized and mobile friendly. And the third is making sure that you keep your technology up to date. So I'm going to share here another association, the Animal Transportation Association, as an example for those three things that I just mentioned. So I ran a test on their site, and they actually are very fast. Their desktop view, it scores a 91 in the Google Page Speed Test, which is a great tool to use, and I definitely suggest it if you're looking to make your website faster. And I can share that link here at the end of my presentation. But it's important to know that folks are really expecting a fast website nowadays. And according to Statista, mobile accounts actually account for half of web traffic worldwide. And if they hop from their phone onto your web page and it's not loading within about 5 to 7 seconds, the likelihood that they're going to hop off of your web page is about 50% more likely than folks to stay. So it's really important that your website is fast and optimized. There's nothing worse than waiting for that page to load. I think we've all probably been there. And I know that I definitely am the type of person to close a window if it takes a while to load. So something to consider for your site. The other thing to consider is making sure that your website looks good on a phone. If everyone is coming to your site from a phone, or it's happening a lot more often, you want to make sure that your page looks beautiful on desktop and on a mobile device. Nowadays, there are a ton of tools you can use online to actually see what your website will look like on different screen sizes. I definitely recommend using those tools and working with your developer to make sure that it looks lovely on both devices, that the content's organized in a way that they're not scrolling a lot to get to a call to action, to get to a click-through button. You want to make sure that they are not. And the third thing that you want to do is make sure that your technology is up to date. So you might notice on some sites that forms are maybe broken, or perhaps you go to donate and you're not able to, and something's just not quite working right. Something's not pulling in correctly. It's really important that you check that all of your technology is up to date. So that can include your website plugins, making sure your theme files are up to date if you use something like WordPress. Ensure that your SSL certificate, so your security certificate, is renewed and up to date, so that your browser doesn't show that scary padlock open and that secure warning that nobody wants to see. Make sure that if you've got a CRM system, that it's all up to date, that if there are any updates to that system, that you're making those updates, and that those external integrations you might have. So if you have and you're integrated with a payment gateway, that those are still set up properly. And you want to do this because you want to make sure that folks are able to get all the value that they can out of your website, and that it's functioning properly. And I just kind of shared here an example of a menu to backtrack a little bit that looks pretty good on mobile. You can sort of see they have that login button right at the top for their members. It still looks pretty good. Their join is at the top here in all caps. I think that's really important. So those are kind of the top 3 questions you should ask yourself to ensure that your website is working for you, that they're kind of must-haves as far as questions you should be asking and things that you can do to tackle those questions. You know, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has, but I think I'll kind of take it over to you, Stephen.
Hey, thanks, Candace. Let me know if you can't hear me. Hey, Tim. Tim's joined us.
Hi, Stephen.
There are some questions coming in, guys. So I figure I'll go through them. And by all means, if there are other questions, feel free to type them into our chat system. We'll take a look at those. Great presentation. Actually, the first question links to one of the last things you were talking about, which was, navigation.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, how many items should there be in a navigation bar? Is there an ideal number?
That's a really good question. And my answer, much to some folks' dismay, is that it actually does depend. It actually used to be best practice to have no more than 7 items, but the reality is it really does depend on a lot of things, such as what kind of things are you actually offering? What kind of resources are you offering? How can you, how do those resources need to be structured in a way that makes sense for your visitor? So although I would say, I think no more than 7 is kind of best practice, it really does depend, because I've been on websites where I've seen 3 items in their navigation and it actually worked because they didn't have enough information. They didn't have a structure that really needed more than 3 top level parent nav items.
Well,
So
I noticed the American Marketing Association had 4.
Yeah. Yep.
And I have to believe they have a lot of content to share. So somehow they've managed to distill it into 4. Now, what I find I see as a trend is putting all of it in the footer. So keep the top light, but it seems like the trend is going more towards the footer. Tim, do you see that happening as well? And how do you guys approach that? If somebody wants more than 7 in the top, is that where you would go with it?
Yeah, I think the footer, or even looking at different menu styles, typically, folks are used to the, click on a high level navigation and then you get, a listing of pages underneath it. But there's ways that you can blow that out. You can create features even within the navigation that allow for you to call out specific things. And we've done that for clients as well. So it's, as many folks know, information architecture is a science in and of itself, and understanding how to layer that information together within a website is a unique skill to have. And I think that a thoughtful process goes a long way in trying to identify how many and where.
Sure. So the next question, this is a good one. I'm interested in the response. So is there a preference between using something like Wix or Squarespace or something like WordPress? And what is your preference?
So as a developer designer, front-end designer, I love WordPress. But it really, again, it depends on what you need as an organization. I've worked with all of those. The thing that I like about WordPress is they do have a lot of plugin options. A lot of folks can submit plugin options and you can download them and integrate them. And I like that because it just kind of opens up a whole world of possibilities. You can do a lot of API integrations. It's a pretty robust framework, but again, it just depends. If you have an association that really needs something super simple, Wix can work pretty well. And if you don't have the resources to afford, like really developing a robust website and you just want to plug things in, I know that those CMS systems can work pretty well.
You're right. So budget often dictates approach to what you get in your website. So something like Wix, Squarespace, and even WordPress is a free open source platform. If you have the penchant or thirst to figure it out, you can do WordPress. Whereas Wix and Squarespace are more turnkey. it's even simpler, made simpler for you.
Yes. Yep.
There's pros and cons of all of them. There's a question coming in. So if you've had websites over the years and the tech is old, where is the best place to start with your developer? Would a plan that Candace has just gone through be developed and communicated to the developer? If yes, what would you estimate the cost and time involved? So I guess the question is internally, you should start first with the association saying we need to build a website, and they have to put and communicate a plan. So they're wondering, what should they expect in terms of time and build?
That's a really great question. So again, it does depend on it. It's kind of so at Trailblaze, we have a process that we use, and we can roll out websites within, we're pretty quick at turning out websites, but we do run into a lot of times kind of the barriers with content. So, internally as an association, it's really important that you have worked through kind of like those questions of who we are, what's our mission, that you can clearly communicate those things, and that when you come to an agency, a designer, developer, Trailblaze, that you're at a place that we can kind of help you set up that content in a way that's going to work really well for your association. So end to end, it can take anywhere from, I've seen we've developed websites at Trailblaze in a matter of a week, Tim. I don't know. From
We
a
don't
week
like to do that, though.
but that's stressful, but anywhere from, I'd say like 4 weeks to
What's the average? What are you seeing on average it realistically takes for an organization? Keeping in mind, we want to give everyone enough time. Like I understand we can get it done in 2 weeks, not ideal. So what do you think is a reasonable amount of time?
I think in a great scenario, meaning that the client and their team is able to, gather content internally and work together to make sure the messaging is all right, and we have all that content ahead of time, or when we ask for it, and within a reasonable timeline.
Right.
Typically 2 months, I think, is like a good timeline. Yeah, 2 to 3. I mean, I would love, my dream is working with associations that, are groups that are like, here we go, let's do this.
Right.
We want to do this, and we're excited about it. So we're getting it all together. That usually works pretty well.
And that also lends to the point of, shelf life of a website. And, I think that most websites typically have a shelf life of about 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about a redevelopment every 2 to 3 years to freshen it up, to make sure that, audiences remain engaged is a good target as well. And, some websites have, 10 pages, others have, 1,000 pages. So, that really comes into play a lot. But most average websites, 2 to 3 months is a good time frame.
And the cost of the job, I mean, really, there's a cost associated here with building the foundation, like building the home, and then there's all the costs for everything you need to now put into the home. So your cost is really variable. Where is the starting point, given the end point could be tens of thousands of dollars? Where would you start with that?
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that we've tried in our time frame is to try to be flexible with clients. So we have a couple of different options. One is a templated option, and that templated option, you get to pick from a couple of templates that we've already pre-developed. So the time's already been spent in that development process, and that's in that $3,000 range. And then to start a custom site, that typically starts around $5,700. I know you guys are our neighbors up north in Canada, so those are U.S. dollars typically. But it's but we like to work with clients. I mean, there's a variety of different things that come into play, whether it's information architecture, some do a rebranding with it that we also help facilitate, and that brings collateral into play too. So it really varies, and but those are starting points just for rough estimates.
And a good way to keep costs down would be to eliminate some of those old pages that we just don't need to make accessible anymore. And learn the tool. Learn all of these systems come with content management, so use it internally. It really isn't that hard to go into WordPress after it's been professionally set up and add another page or edit a page. So those are also ways for our clients to, to take a little more of the responsibility on, but keep that cost down and come out with a winning website.
Yeah, and if a couple of little tips too, that we just didn't have time in the greater presentation, but make sure that you have right now on your website, some sort of analytics set up so that we can track. If you are going to go through a redesign process, a good developer is going to say, okay, where is traffic coming? How are they getting there? And that's something that you need to have analytics set up. Most folks do have that set up these days. We always like to start too with a very customer-centric approach. And a great way to get some customer demographics on your website that is separate from Google Analytics is to add the Facebook pixel to your website. That's another option to get some of that data. So those are just two tips that if you are thinking about it in the next year or so, get that stuff on there ASAP so that you can start to get some analytics on your site.
And to Stephen's point, just to back up just a second, one thing that I do like to do, I know we like to do at Trailblaze, is when we hand over a website after it's developed, I like to do a walkthrough with our customers to make sure they do feel empowered to make changes on their site and know how to do that using the builder that we use. I don't, we want to make sure that you know how to handle what you have with technology, especially with the website. So that is something we definitely like to do.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, we've come to the end of our time together. If anyone's interested in learning more, I know you're happy to take a call and chat about the current situation. How would people go about getting in touch with you guys?
That's a great question, and I'm going to share here in the chat a link to my Calendly. So if you would like to schedule a free website consultation, I'm happy to do that. I'm going to drop that in here in just a second.
We'll also share it when we send out the link to the video, but feel free if you have it handy. We'll also include it in our information that we're going to send out to everybody after the call's over. Hey, well, I'd like to thank you both for coming and presenting. We'd love to have you back on, and I already have that next topic. You touched on it, which was the social media. I'm sure people are interested in how to leverage social media. So maybe we can talk about that. In the meantime, thank you everyone for coming. I hope you're able to take something away. We'd love to hear your feedback about this particular webinar and any other webinars you'd like to see in the future. On that note, thanks again and have a great afternoon. Bye for now.